So I have a question. How do we bridge the gap between cleverness and wisdom? We live in an age of rapid invention and scientific discovery when so much of what we've learned is literally transforming our world. How do we balance between the clever things we can do and the wisdom with which we act? For much of my life, I've been noticing gaps and wondering how to bridge them. The first prison I ever visited was a maximum security prison in South Africa. I was there to learn about rehabilitation programs run by the inmates. I walked into a room full of men wearing orange jumpsuits, lying on the floor, meditating. 25 young men, aged between 17 and 22, each serving a sentence of between 12 and 48 years for violent crimes. I went expecting to see a difference between us, to notice something bad in them that I didn't share. But that wasn't true. Instead, I met people who might have been my brother or my son. I sat listening to stories of boys who typically had very little love in their lives. With depressing predictability, they'd lost their way, made terrible choices, and done horrific things to other people. I saw young men struggling to hold up a mirror, to look themselves in the eye, and find something to love. And I saw myself in them. Instead of the gulf that I thought we'd notice between us, my deepest feeling that day was a profound sense of what we had in common. The work I do has taken me to all kinds of places. From a factory in Shanghai where 20,000 women sit in rows silently as far as the eye can see, making laptops, to a slum in Mumbai that lies beside a river so dense with filth that it flows very slowly like thick black treacle. From a campus in Silicon Valley where engineers are creating driverless cars, to a shack in Lagos where a single teacher stands before 100 children in a school without power, without electricity, and without books. Spending time with all these different people, I often feel as if the gap is getting wider as the world speeds up. We are ever more connected in so many ways, but also the world is more disrupted and more complicated. And at the same time, we human beings, we seem to learn very, very slowly when it comes to our own compassion and humanity. So we have a gap. On the one hand, we have today technology with the power to solve many of our biggest challenges faster, cheaper, and at greater scale than ever before. And on the other hand, as we better understand our complete interdependence with one another, so we come to realize how vulnerable we are and how much damage we can do. I love this quote from Rumi, the Sufi poet, written way back in the 13th century. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. And today I am wise, so I'm changing myself. Well, what I'm still learning is that every gap I see in the world out there is a reflection of a gap inside here. And that in those moments when I can find the compassion to heal the gap inside myself, I can transform the impact that I have on those around me. Neuroscience shows how we're wired for compassion. Research on mindfulness shows how the brain can and does change when we focus on kindness. History shows that cultures advance, social norms shift. Indeed, they can do so remarkably quickly. So in a world of accelerating change in so many fields of life, I think we need to imagine compassion on a similar exponential scale, what I call CompassionX, wisdom combined with the brilliance of human creativity. And that scale of transformation only happens when millions of people like us, choose to make a change in how we show up. The idea of CompassionX has 3 steps. And the first step is doing the work on the inside. And it looks different for every person. In my case, it's been a heavy question that I've carried for years. Am I doing enough? There are so many problems, so many challenges, so much suffering, so little time. Am I making a difference? Do I even matter? It took a very special friend to point out how absurd it was, not to mention arrogant, for me to assume that it was my job to fix everything. That every time I climb a mountain, I'll get to the top and I'll look out from the peak and I'll see countless more mountains. That to simply keep on walking is enough. Doing the work on the inside is a lifetime's journey, life in fact, with some welcome breaks along the way. When the clouds part, I feel the sun on my face, and I know, at least until I next forget, I know that I am enough. The second step in CompassionX is meeting in the big middle, all of us and beyond. A couple of years back, I was in the West Bank visiting leaders from the Israeli settler movement who'd built controversial settlements in the midst of Palestinian communities that hated them being there. I got into a heated argument with one of the settler leaders, a woman named Miriam. We had an angry debate full of emotion and judgment. Neither of us was remotely interested in hearing the other. And every time she spoke, I felt my brain rushing in a whir to find a smart reply. Until I made myself slow down. And I began to listen. I heard what Miriam had to say. I didn't agree with her, but I understood. And in that process, I made a little bit of space. Enough space for us both to move from fury to disappointment and fear and finally to tears. I couldn't just put Miriam in a box marked other and write her off as wrong or crazy. We were not on the same page, but I knew that somehow the intimacy we shared actually mattered. So, in a world that can feel increasingly polarized and radicalized, it's easy to focus on all the drama and the violence that are going on out there, to move from we to they, to take myself out of the picture where I don't have to take responsibility. But the truly radical work isn't happening out at the extremes. The radical work lies in healing the big, messy middle where we all live. It's about occupying the middle and overcoming the difficulties that push people to the margins. Doing the work in the middle takes creativity. It calls for generosity. It calls for humor. It calls for self-awareness. This is tough stuff to do, but really, really important. And the third step is about connecting the dots. All of those magical dots, people like all of you. A month ago, I made my first visit to Detroit. In 1960, Detroit, on a per capita basis, was ranked the richest city in America. And in 2013, it filed for bankruptcy, unable to keep the street lights on, unable to clear the trash from the sidewalks, with more than a third of its buildings vacant or unoccupied, and with 60% of its children living in poverty. Yet what I experienced there, just 2.5 years after the bankruptcy, was the incredible power of hope and pride and will. In a single afternoon, I met with an entrepreneur who's roasting coffee in disused factories with a workforce from the homeless community. He's created a chain of local cafes and is pushing to sell another 1 million bags of coffee to fund more of them in the poorest parts of town. I met with a PhD student who's using big data to create eco-efficient urban farms, and with a former gang member who's running turnaround programs for young people at risk. I met with the leader of a major corporation who's creating hundreds of new jobs in Detroit, and I met with a young mother who's working with 15 of the poorest schools in the city to change the outcomes for children. I was reminded that whenever I feel disheartened by the gap between the clever things we can do and the wisdom with which we do them, I'm probably spending too much time following the news and too little time meeting people. Connecting the dots is about seeking out and amplifying and scaling the millions of examples of compassionate, courageous leadership at work in every corner of life. It's about the people who are the bridge. We have a surplus, an abundance of great solutions. We just have to see how we can connect them even more powerfully. So, doing the work on the inside, meeting in the middle, connecting the dots. Isn't it impossibly idealistic? To be honest, this question, the idealistic one, feels pretty daunting, very tough. Compassion is a hard word to use in tough company. But I think this is a conversation that we need to have much more of, like a missing piece of the puzzle. We have lots of issues to deal with. Climate change, migration, education, healthcare, jobs, social exclusion. The list goes on. But the idea of CompassionX isn't a choice between being smart or being wise. It's about combining the two. Combining the phenomenal power of ideas and innovation with our own lived experience. Albert Einstein, a man who knew a thing or two about cleverness, once said, "Compassionate people are geniuses in the art of living, more necessary to the dignity, security, and joy of humanity than the discoverers of knowledge." And so, I wonder, can we bring the kind of focus to this question that we're so good at bringing to other fields of life? The paradox is that it takes thousands of us and then millions of us to change a culture. And yet this all begins with just one, with you and with me. Can enough of us live compassion at scale in a way that changes the outcomes for society? I hope so. I really hope so, because the stakes look very high. We are the hardware. We have the software. Thankfully, we don't have to speed up the evolution of human nature. We just have to practice what we already know, starting with the only person I can actually change, and that's me. Thank you.